Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of ENNIS Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness podcast. I'm here with co-host Walter Dial and business partner Corby McGordon. Our mission here on the podcast is to help you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building transferable or sellable business value, and then for planning your eventual exit from the business. We want to help you build a business that can be transferred successfully, and then we want to help you exit successfully on your own terms and conditions. Back in October, we had an episode with our alliance partner and exit advisor, Dave Lokos, and we were talking about how his implementation of the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS, helped him exit two businesses successfully on his own terms and conditions and for maximum value. And during that conversation, of course, the roles of EOS Implementer and EOS Integrator were referenced, and how some businesses would engage actually a fractional integrator to help oversee the ongoing integration of EOS in the business. And so we decided that it could be helpful to have a follow-up on that, about that role of fractional integrator and what it is, what they do, etc. And so that's our topic today. What does a fractional EOS integrator do? Dave is with us again. Just if you didn't listen to the first one, and Dave's the founder of ExitWell, an advisory firm specializing in exit planning strategy and sell-side advisory for small to mid-market business owners. He's certified as an exit planning advisor and he has over 30 years of experience in executive and entrepreneurial leadership and management. And he does what we do. He helps owners grow, protect, and maximize business value while preparing for successful transitions. And actually, we're working together at this point on serving clients. So, Dave, welcome back. Good to have you back, buddy.
Thanks, Pat. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hey, Dave, I'm going to start us off. So, I'm familiar with like fractional CFO. Is that kind of the same concept as fractional EOS integrator, or totally different?
Well, it's the same concept, only in that it's not a full-time position. So, in simple terms, fractional EOS implementer, it is a part-time position, but it's also a high-level executive who steps into the business to really act as the glue that holds everything together. Think of them as a COO for hire, as opposed to a CFO, who speaks the specific language of EOS. They're not really there to give advice like a consultant. They're actually there to run the business so the founder doesn't have to.
Yeah. So, hey, Dave, you just mentioned implementer. Talk about the difference, just again, high level, the difference between implementer and integrator. And integrator is really what we're focusing on here today in this conversation, but just give a high level differentiation of those two.
Yeah. If I did mention implementer, I may have mistakenly mentioned that, but they're different, very different roles. The implementer teaches the EOS framework and facilitates the rollout, whereas a fractional integrator actually lives inside the business and owns execution week to week. So implementers install the system, integrators run it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so an integrator, fractional, either full-time or fractional, they really become part of the team. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so when do you think you would, because you were actually a full-time integrator, integrating into both of your businesses, when would you opt toward fractional versus full-time?
Yeah, I wore, in the EOS framework, I wore both hats of what they would call the visionary as well as the integrator hat. And I took on the full-time integration or operations piece of the integrator role, uh, largely because I had a great team around me and I was able to balance both roles. But in terms of when companies might need one, if you have a CEO or owner who often acts as the visionary, more focused on big ideas, relationships, um, things like that. And execution of all those things becomes inconsistent. In some cases, the owner may simply lack the bandwidth to stay focused on both vision and execution. Um, Initiatives may start really strong but drift over time, without clear ownership and follow through. So, if that's what somebody's experiencing, that's a sign that it may be time to bring somebody else in to help. So, a fractional integrator really brings focus, discipline, and stability without the cost of a full time executive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Dave, you mentioned kind of in passing, the conditions, if you will, when somebody would need one. But say an owner gets a hold of you and said, Dave, I'd really love you to become my fractional integrator. What do you want to see in the owner in terms of their goals, their reasoning for having an integrator? Because oftentimes owners will say, yeah, I really need to do that. But in reality, they're not necessarily committed to actually acting and changing the organization. What would you look for?
Yeah, I think that, the owner, number one, has to recognize there's a gap. There's a gap between um, the vision that the owner has and then what's actually happening at the ground level. They also have to be able to uh, be willing to let go of some of the day-to-day control. Um, Something else would be in terms of um, working relationship would be if an owner doesn't want to be challenged, it's probably not a good idea. They're not in a good spot to try to move forward, or maybe there's um, a lack of commitment to the EOS framework. And so, yeah, they do it sometimes, they don't do it other times. They really need to be committed to the framework in order to uh, make that relationship work. I guess the only other things I could think of are um, you may have a business that's just so complicated that it really might require a full time role as opposed to a part time role, and that's just going to depend on what it looks like. As well, the affordability. If their financial condition is such that they can bring on an extra expense like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So related question then, because you highlighted things that were kind of flooding through my mind, but that idea of the gap between vision and the actual results that they're experiencing it.
Mhm.
Um, what happens? What are the consequences of an owner actually not using an integrator when it would seem that they need one?
Yeah, well, I think the natural consequences of that are going to be that the owner ends up very dissatisfied and unhappy, and you probably have an environment that is pretty frustrating to work in because if you're a visionary, you're going to have a lot of ideas, and you're going to be an idea factory, and you're going to want to be going, you know, one day you want to do this, the other day and they're all good things, but you probably need somebody to help filter some of that into what's realistic, what's doable. Yeah, so that's one thing, and I think for an owner, it can get very frustrating because um, if that's where your mindset is at, and you really are the visionary in the company, that's where you really enjoy work and enjoy focusing your time. But the rest of this, the rest of the leadership role of integrator can't be ignored, because all those great ideas you have are not going to be executed the way you want them to. So, yeah, I think that, in terms of some other types of consequences are lack of accountability. I've seen, even in my own companies from time to time, when as a leader, if I'm not holding people accountable consistently and effectively, and that's one of the roles of the integrator, um, it just leads to morale issues. It leads to dissatisfaction and basically chaos. So, or some measure of chaos. So I think you kind of recognize that, maybe I need something like this. I need help here if I'm experiencing that kind of pain in the organization.
No, that makes perfect sense. And then just along that lines, you mentioned again, and we all know that owners can have a hard time giving up responsibility or delegating it. Do you find that does EOS, and this is a more general question, but does EOS actually help facilitate that shift in an owner's mindset? And if so, how?
I think it does. I think it does when it's executed effectively and consistently, because what the framework enables is, uh, as we discussed a little bit last time, you're breaking down the big vision into 90-day objectives or rocks, into weekly to-dos. And those 90-day objectives or rocks, they have an owner. And the owner isn't necessarily going to be the owner of the company. It's going to be somebody on a leadership team who takes responsibility for that. And so, by executing the system consistently, you end up with a leadership team it becomes a habit that, they know they own this, they know it's their responsibility, and they're held accountable for achieving it. So at the end of the day, it has this great impact on the company, because suddenly you have a much more self-sustaining leadership team. And, you know, self-sustaining leadership team in terms of business value, in terms of so many other things, means, hey, uh, me, the owner, I don't have to do all these things and make sure they get done. I actually have people I can rely on to get it done. And the system facilitates that.
So, Dave, in regard to what would a fractional integrator actually do week to week, and how many hours a month is that going to take?
Yeah, I mean, week to week, it's pretty. The basic things are you're running a weekly meeting, weekly level 10 leadership meeting. You're ensuring to-do lists are completed and quarterly rocks are on target. You're also working closely with the visionary, because one of your main jobs is to ensure that the vision that the owner has, or the CEO, is getting traction. I think you're also, again, on a regular basis, you're holding the leadership team accountable for completing these tasks. You also, I think it's inevitable that you run into cross-functional friction, and so you have to make sure decisions or issues are revisited as needed, and ensure the whole company is working in tandem, or as Gino Wickman says in the book, traction rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, and would the visionary see the fractional integrator as their boss? Would the fractional integrator be the visionary's boss in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, before I answer that, I didn't actually answer your other question, which was how the time commitment, what the time involvement is. And I think typically it's a 1 day a week endeavor. And maybe 10 hours, because there's going to be a couple of other things that come up that need to be dealt with. So 25 to 30 hours a month, somewhere in there. I think that math is, or maybe 30 to 40 hours a month. So in terms of time, that would be the typical time commitment. In terms of, hey, is the integrator the visionary's boss? No, definitely not. But they are a counterbalance. So you can think of it as a visionary owns focus on the 30,000-foot view, like the future direction, big ideas, etc. The visionary really commands authority over the culture, R&D, big deals and relationships. Whereas the integrator owns the ground level operations, execution, P&L, results, and does have authority over the leadership team and process. But in terms of being the boss or the visionary, no, that's not the case. Typically, the visionary is sitting in the highest seat in the company.
But did you just say, though, that the integrator would be the boss of others on the leadership team?
Yeah, typically for an integrator to be effective, he or she is going to have authority within the leadership team. I mean, that authority is going to be, bounded by whatever the owner wants, but there has to be the ability for the integrator to have requirements and ask things out of the leadership team that he can expect they're going to respond to. So there needs to be some. I guess to clarify, I'm not necessarily talking about hire and fire authority, but in terms of, hey, the leadership team is answerable to the fractional integrator. So I guess at a high level, between the visionary and the integrator, the visionary has to treat the integrator really as a partner versus like an admin or an executive assistant or something like that. And likewise, while the integrator can help clarify or filter the visionary's genius, as an integrator, you don't want to stifle that either. You need to be working with very closely with the visionary. So that chemistry really is important. It needs to be a really good chemistry between the two positions, and an understanding and clarity in what the roles are.
Yeah, well, in an ideal situation, wouldn't the leadership team be accountable to the leadership team, to one another in the leadership team? And the fractional integrator, it ends up playing a key role in just helping facilitate that accountability amongst the team, holding each other on the team accountable. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what should end up happening. So that, at some point in time, if the company grows enough, gets big enough, and decides, okay, it's time to bring on a full-time operations manager or COO, as I said, you have a self-sustaining leadership team. And part of what I meant by that was that they do hold each other accountable. But I think what a good integrator can do and a good fractional integrator can do is really facilitate that type of relationship between the members on the team by modeling how that works on a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so Dave, skill set, experience. What does that fractional integrator need to bring to the table to really make it work?
Yeah. So I think in terms of skill set, definitely operators who have sat in the seat of a former CEO, COO, or integrators with experience running the EOS framework and using its tools. I think you definitely want a background that shows credibility, good judgment, and also the ability, and this is an important one, to handle tension in challenging situations and challenging people. Can also make a big difference. So, yeah, knowledge of EOS obviously is important, but the other factors are really equally as important. Because without that track record of having been there and done that and shown that you can execute, as well as you can uh, manage a team of people effectively, it doesn't it's not going to you're going to end up with some of the same challenges you had when you got into the engagement if the integrator doesn't bring those skills to the
Yeah.
position.
Yeah, and along that lines, could you comment on, as you're talking, there is it appears to be a management role, but there's a leadership role, and it's not just managing a process, but it's leading the team. How would an owner actually kind of discern that? No, okay, that's a guy that will actually help me move the ball ahead.
Yeah, and so your question is, how would an owner be able to evaluate a potential fractional integrator to be able to be successful in his company? Well, again, track record is really important. If if I was looking for a fractional integrator and I came across somebody I knew who had been very successful, had led teams of people in their own company for a long time, um, and also showed that they experienced growth and success. That would be the top of my list. That having that um, track record, been there, done that, would probably be number one. And then the other thing would be really just uh, in conjunction with that, um, familiarity with the EOS tools is important, but that can also be learned. But I think chemistry, demeanor, and it's really got to be a symbiotic relationship between the visionary or the owner and the fractional integrator, because they have to be able to work at a level together that's really going to move the ball forward. So just like of a lot of engagements where there's an ongoing relationship, the chemistry has to be there. And so I think those are things I would say are some things to look for.
Yeah. So then, one last question, unless one of these other guys has something to wrap us up with. Uh, when is a company not ready to have a fractional integrator?
Yeah, I've kind of addressed that a little earlier, and just to reiterate some of the things, I think if an owner isn't willing to let go of the day to day, if they have their hands in everything and they get a lot of satisfaction out of that, micromanaging, it's just not going to work. The other thing I mentioned earlier is lack of commitment to EOS, where they're really, yeah, it's a great idea, but I don't need to do it exactly like this or exactly like that, and I do it sometimes and not others. If they're not fully committed to really implementing, or not implementing, but executing the framework and the tools the way they're intended, it's going to make it hard for an integrator to be successful running EOS. And I think the last thing I mentioned was just the complexity of the business. If the problems of the business, if it's frankly, if it's burning cash and the owner um, can't afford to bring in an outside consultant, that could be a very real situation. And or if the issues in the business are so complicated that it's just going to need a lot more time from somebody than part-time effort.
Actually, there is one more question. Um, what just let's wrap up with you talking about, from your experience and perspective, how does this impact your business value and readiness for exit?
Yeah, well, I can also, definitely speak from my own experience with my own companies. which experience by having effective integration, we experience strong execution, leadership alignment, more repeatable processes. All those things, you reduce owner dependency and they increase predictability. And as and experience in the exit planning space, that's something buyers are willing to pay a premium for. So a fractional integrator can help make those things happen, and often becomes a quiet but significant value creation lever. I think also using a fractional integrator can give the owner the bandwidth needed to be clear on his own personal goals and vision. I know, we've talked to some owners who just are overwhelmed with what's happening in the company. They need help, and they're just trying to survive. And maybe the company's doing well, but personally, they're just trying to survive. They don't have anywhere near the bandwidth they need to think about their personal direction, their personal vision. But all those things are important at some point down the line to make the business ready for the owner to exit. So I think those things are some of the main things that come to mind.
Very good. Okay, good conversation, fellas. Walter, Corby, anything else before we wrap up?
No, not for me.
Okay, all right, good. So Dave, if someone wants to contact you, how should they do that?
Well, they can go to my website, ExitWellAdvisors.com. They can find me on LinkedIn, email and phone number there. Just reach out, book an appointment. And I would say that, hey, if you are listening to this and you're curious, if you can ask yourself this question: is EOS in my company working as well as it should? Is it generating great results? And if the answer isn't a resounding yes, then a fractional integrator is definitely worth exploring.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. And listeners, you can also, if you go to our website, you'll see Dave on there too. You can reach out to him. And if you want help in maximizing the value and the sellability, the transferability of your business, or planning that eventual exit, and even life after the business, what your next act is going to be, you can contact us here at ENNIS Legacy Partners through our website, NSLP.com, or ExitReadiness.com gets you there as well. Thanks for listening, as always. And if you've benefited from today's conversation, please consider liking it and sharing it on social media. Until next time on the Exit Readiness Podcast, this is Pat Ennis, Walter Dial, with Corby McGordon signing off.